December 26, 2004. A mother lounges by a resort pool in Thailand. Her three boys splash in the water, palm trees, blue sky. Then she hears something. A rumble from the deep. She looks around. No one else seems to notice. But the sound keeps getting louder. She turns toward the ocean. The water is gone. On the horizon, a black line, rising, moving toward them. What happens next will be one of nature's most destructive moments in history. This is the story of Thailand's biggest tsunami and the family that survived it. Maria Belon is a doctor from Spain. Her husband Enrique works in business. They have 3 sons. Lucas is 10, Tomas is 8, Simon is 5. The family lives in Japan for Enrique's job. But this Christmas, they've flown to Thailand. A chance to escape the cold and spend time together. They're staying at the Orchid Resort Hotel in Khao Lak. White sand beaches, crystal water, rows of palm trees lining the coast. Khao Lak is quieter than Phuket, more relaxed. A place where European tourists come to escape the winter. The resort is brand new, surrounded by smaller bungalows and beachfront restaurants. Paradise, by any measure. The family arrived on Christmas Eve. They spent Christmas Day exploring the beach, eating Thai food, watching the sun set over the Andaman Sea. Now it's the morning of December 26th, their 3rd day in paradise. Maria lounges by the pool reading a Spanish novel. Enrique sits nearby watching the boys. Lucas is showing his younger brothers how to hold their breath underwater. Tomas keeps count. Simone splashes at the surface, laughing. A perfect morning. The sky is clear, the air is warm, nothing to suggest what's coming. 500 kilometers away, deep beneath the Indian Ocean, 2 tectonic plates have been grinding against each other for centuries. The Indian plate slowly diving beneath the Burma plate, building pressure along a 900-mile fault line. At 7:59 a.m. local time, the pressure releases. The plates slip. The ocean floor jolts upward by 40 meters. A 9.1 magnitude earthquake, the most powerful ever recorded in Asia. The 3rd strongest since modern seismography began in 1900. The earthquake itself barely reaches Thailand, but something far worse does. The displacement sends walls of water racing across the Indian Ocean at 500 miles per hour, the speed of a jet plane. In deep water, the waves are barely noticeable. Ships don't even feel them pass. A fishing boat could sail right over one, and its crew would never know. But as the waves approach shallow coastlines, the ocean floor rises to meet them. The waves slow down. The water piles up behind them. By the time they reach shore, they're walls of destruction 30 feet high. At 10 a.m., the sea around Khao Lak begins to recede. The water pulls back hundreds of meters, exposing the seafloor. Fish flop on the sand. Some tourists walk out to look. They don't know this is the warning sign. Maria hears it first. A sound unlike anything she's ever heard. A deep, horrible rumble. Like the earth is being torn apart. She looks around. The sky is still blue. Everything looks perfect. But the sound keeps getting louder. Then she turns toward the ocean, a black wall, 30 feet high, moving toward the coast faster than she can process. The wave slams into Khao Lak. Maria has no time to run. The wave doesn't stop at the beach. It plows through everything, crushing buildings, flipping cars, tearing palm trees from the ground like weeds. Concrete walls crumble like paper. A Thai Navy patrol boat gets picked up and dropped 2 kilometers inland. Beach bungalows that stood for decades are erased in seconds. The Orchid Resort vanishes. 4,000 people in Khao Lak will die today. The highest death toll in Thailand. Maria never sees it hit. One moment she's by the pool, the next she's underwater. The force is beyond anything she could have imagined. She's spinning, tumbling, being slammed against walls. She feels them crumbling around her. Debris tears at her body from every direction. Broken wood, furniture, glass. She can't tell which way is up. She can't see anything. Just brown water and chaos. She's underwater for over 3 minutes. Her lungs fill with water and mud and debris. Later, doctors will say she should have drowned. That nobody survives 3 minutes under like that. Somehow she surfaces. She grabs a fallen tree, gasping, coughing. The world around her has been erased. Where the resort stood, there's only brown water choked with debris. Uprooted trees, shattered wood, bodies floating face down. Her husband was in the pool with the boys. She's certain they're all dead. Then she sees something. 15 meters away, a small head bobbing in the water, dark hair, struggling against the current. Lucas. Her son is screaming for her. Maria lets go of the tree and swims toward him. The water is thick with wreckage, broken furniture, splintered wood, things she can't identify. Sharp objects scrape her skin. She doesn't stop. She reaches him, grabs him, holds on. Then the second wave hits. This one drags them both through a field of rubble. Maria is slammed against debris, raked across jagged metal and broken wood. When she surfaces again, her right leg is torn open, muscle and tissue exposed, blood pouring into the water. She and Lucas find a tree and climb into it. They cling to the branches, exhausted, bleeding. Maria looks at her leg. The wound is catastrophic. She's a doctor. She knows what this means. She's dying. She holds her son and waits. Minutes pass, maybe hours. The water around them is brown and still. Debris floats everywhere. Then she hears it, faint, a child crying. They find the source, a small blonde boy, maybe 2 years old, Swedish, alone in the wreckage, tangled in debris. His name is Daniel. Maria and Lucas pull him free. Now there are 3 of them in the tree. A dying woman, her 10-year-old son, and a toddler who has lost everything. Maria tears palm leaves and wraps them around her leg. A primitive bandage on a catastrophic wound. She's losing too much blood to walk on her own. Lucas has to support her weight. They climb down and start walking. Away from the water. Toward anything that might be safety. Every step is agony. She leaves a trail of blood behind her. Then a Thai villager appears. A man who has lost his own home, his own neighbors, maybe his own family. But he sees this foreign woman bleeding to death and refuses to let her die. He doesn't speak her language. She doesn't speak his. It doesn't matter. He drags her through the mud for hours, through wreckage and bodies and water that won't fully recede. He doesn't stop until he finds help. They reach a hospital in Taquapa. Maria needs surgery or she'll die. But somewhere in the destruction, the rest of her family is still missing. The hospital is chaos. Hundreds of injured people everywhere, on beds, on floors, in hallways, outside on the ground. Doctors and nurses working without rest, without enough supplies, without enough beds. Walls covered with photographs of missing people. Families searching desperately for anyone they recognize. Maria is in critical condition. Wounds to her leg and chest. Infection already setting in from the mud and debris. She needs surgery immediately or she will die. Before they take her away, she tells Lucas to help. Don't just sit here waiting, she says. Help other people find their families. It's what we do. So that's what he does. A 10-year-old boy wandering through the overwhelmed hospital, looking at faces, calling out names, trying to reunite strangers with their loved ones. Meanwhile, somewhere in the devastation, Enrique is alive. When the wave hit, he was in the pool with Tomas and Simon. The water ripped them apart instantly. Enrique was dragged under, tumbled through chaos, slammed against things he couldn't see. When he surfaced, he grabbed a tree and held on as the water raged around him. He watched the second wave come, then a third. Each one carrying more debris, more bodies. When the flooding slowed, he started searching. The resort was gone, just wreckage and brown water everywhere. He called out for his sons, for Maria. Nothing. He found Tomas first, clinging to a tree 30 meters away, terrified but alive. Then Simon, the youngest, holding debris that saved his life. Both boys scraped and bruised, coughing up water but breathing. Enrique gathered his sons. He had no idea if Maria and Lucas survived. He'd seen them disappear into the churning water. He assumed the worst, but he had to know for certain. He found survivors heading to the mountains, relief workers directing people to high ground in case another wave came. Enrique made an impossible decision. He couldn't search and protect the younger boys at the same time. He gave Tomas and Simon to strangers, a family he'd never met, and asked them to keep his children safe. Then he turned back toward the destruction. The landscape was unrecognizable. Resorts that stood for years were simply gone, roads buried under mud, bodies floating in standing water everywhere he looked. Enrique went from hospital to hospital, searching faces, checking survivor lists, studying walls of photographs, thousands of pictures taped up by desperate families. A German tourist named Karl, also searching for his own wife and children, helped him cover more ground. Hours passed, then a day. No sign of Maria or Lucas. Enrique keeps searching. Back at the hospital, Maria is in surgery. Doctors fighting to save her leg, to stop the infection spreading through her body, her organs starting to fail. Lucas waits alone in the chaos. He's been helping families all day, just like his mother told him. Walking through the wards, looking at faces, calling out names. He watched Daniel reunite with his father, the Swedish toddler they pulled from the wreckage. The father fell to his knees when he saw his son alive. Now Lucas returns to where his mother's bed should be. It's empty. A nurse checks her clipboard, tells him his mother is dead, died during surgery. She's sorry. Lucas feels the world collapse. He's 10 years old. He survived a tsunami. He helped save a stranger's child, and now he's completely alone. They take him to a tent where children without families are being kept. Rows of kids on mats, some crying, some just staring, orphans of the wave. Lucas sits among them, numb. Except it's a mistake. Another patient died, a woman named Muriel Barnes. In the chaos of hundreds of patients and not enough staff, the charts got mixed up. When someone realizes the error, they find Lucas and bring him back inside. His mother is lying in a bed in the ICU, unconscious, tubes everywhere, but breathing, alive. Lucas sits beside her. For 2 days they wait together, not knowing if Enrique survived, not knowing if Tomas and Simon are alive, just waiting. 2 days after the wave, Enrique reaches the hospital in Tacuapa. He's been searching non-stop, barely sleeping, exhausted, running on nothing but desperation. He walks through the crowded hallways, scanning faces like he's done at a dozen hospitals before this one. Then he sees him, Lucas, standing in a corridor. For a moment, neither moves. Then Enrique runs to his son and holds him. Maria is here, Lucas tells him. Alive. She's in intensive care, but she's alive. Enrique goes to her room. She's barely conscious, but she sees him, reaches for his hand. Then someone spots them from across the hospital grounds. 2 small figures, running and yelling. Tomas and Simon, the family that took them to the mountains, brought them back to search the hospitals. By pure chance, the same hospital, the same day, the same moment. 5 people, torn apart by a wave that killed 230,000. All alive, all together. Maria was airlifted to Singapore, 4 months in the hospital, 16 surgeries. Part of her leg gone forever. Every year on December 26th, the family goes to the beach for the thousands who didn't make it back.